In this module, we are going to be creating an Amazon Web Service Elastic Compute Cloud instance, an EC2 instance. And now we are on the EC2 dashboard and we'll be creating or launching an instance. You can create an instance to say to get started, launch an Amazon EC2 instance, which is a virtual server. So an instance basically is a virtual server in the cloud. You could actually migrate some instance which you already have on your on-premise or in your on-premise environment into the AWS cloud. So we are going to be launching an instance. We take launch instance, and now we take launch instance, we give the name of an instance. By default, you should always take note that instances are region specific. You're creating an instance in a given region, so we are creating this instance in North California. Now they say launch an instance. Amazon allows you to create virtual machines or instances that run on AWS cloud. Quickly get started by following the simple steps below. So for you to begin, you must give the instance a name. So I'll call this instance Devops in my prod server. Devops in my prod server. This is the name of the instance which we'll be receiving or which we'll be seeing. Devops in my prod server. Now, the next most important thing, like I explained in the previous video, we need to have an Amazon machine image. Basically, it is the application and operating systems which the instance or which a virtual server will come with. AWS says that an AMI is a template that contains the software configuration, operating system, application server, and applications required to launch your instance. Now, for you to create an instance, you must have an idea on what operating system you want to run this instance. If you purchase a computer, basically, for you to start using that computer, you must have an operating system. So in this case, AWS has a vast majority of different operating systems. AWS has Amazon Web Service Linux, a customized version of Linux just for Amazon Web Service. They have Ubuntu, they have Windows, Red Hat, SUSE Linux, Debian, and a lot more other AMIs. So every time you want to launch an instance, you must select with the operating system which your instance is going to be operating or which is going to be running on. So in this first example, we are going to be creating an Amazon Linux instance. Now, for you to create an Amazon Linux instance, you first start by selecting the operating system, which is Amazon Linux, and after that you must specify now the Amazon specific image. The specific image, like I explained earlier, the images are basically the entire operating system with its configurations. And take note, not all images are free. You always want to use images that has free tier eligible for you to run any configuration on that image. So we are going to be taking the Amazon Linux 2023 AMI, which is, they say it is free tier eligible, means that you can provision resources on this instance for free, basically. So I'll select the free tier eligible, Amazon Linux 2023 free tier eligible, and if you select it, you get a brief description. And Amazon Linux 2023 is a modern general purpose Linux based OS that comes with 5 years of long-term support. So there's AWS gives 5 years long-term support for that instance. Now you also see that the instance architecture is 64-bit, and then we have the boot mode UAEFI. Then this is the instance AMI ID, and it's launching this instance with the username EC2 user. We are going to see that if you're launching different instances, they come with different usernames, and these are basically Linux users that can access this server. Now, after specifying the instance name, the next most important configuration is for you to select an instance type. Now, it is very important for you to take into consideration this instance type section, because this is where AWS makes a lot of money from its customers. Based on the capacity of the compute resource you need, you spend a different amount per hour. So you can see AWS even says you can get advice. AWS says they can give you advice. So they say get advice on instance type selection. Tell us about your instance type requirements and we'll provide solutions for you. So they say, okay, for example, your workload is maybe an app server or web server. The use case, maybe you are hosting or you want to do web hosting. The priority, are you looking at price performance or high performance or low cost? So if you take low cost, do you have a specific person that should provide the CPU? Do you want an Intel CPU, AMD CPU, a Mac CPU? Let's say, for example, you need an Intel CPU. AWS will give you now an advice on the type of instances you can use. So they say for deploying a web/app server workload for web hosting, use one of the Intel CPU with preference for cost optimization. The recommended instance are T3, M7 Flex, and M6. So the T3 instances are bustable, general purpose, and then the M7 instance is powered by 4th generation Intel. So this is some kind of an advice before you can launch an instance, this particular instance type. You can equally just come here, you can get info about what an instance is. They say an instance type, select an instance type that meets your computing, your memory, your networking, and your storage needs. Then AWS says that prices shown are for instances running common operating systems with no predefined software. So even if you do not have any software running, the moment you pay or the moment you provision this instance, you automatically start being charged. So if you click here, you'll see all the different instance types: T2 nano, T2 micro, T2 small, medium, large, T2 2x large, T3 nano, and so on. So basically, you always want to start using the free tier. So select the free tier eligible. We are going to be using the free tier eligible instance. Now, for you to SSH, which is the next configuration, the same, you can use a key pair to securely connect to your instance. Ensure that you have access to the selected key pair before you launch the instance. Now, if you're launching an instance where you do not have access to the key pair, you will definitely not be able to securely log into the instance. And when they say securely log into the instance, what do they mean? They mean you being able to get secure access, SSH, secure shell, SSH access into the instance. Now, if you click down here, you can proceed without a key pair, which AWS says is not recommended. Meaning, if you have some issues with your server, you will not be able to troubleshoot because you not configure the SSH and all the like. So that is why we are going to create a new key pair. So you click on create a new key pair here. Now you say key pairs allow you to connect to your instances securely. For us to begin, we must give the key pair a key pair name. So we can give it the name Devops with my key pair, Devops with my key pair, and you also want to allow the encryption as RSA, and you allow the file format as .pem. Now, when you give the name Devops in my key pair, you allow the encryption as RSA and the file format as .pem. You click on create key pair. Now, when you click on create key pair, you must take note of where the key pair is being stored. AWS will tell you that the key pair will be downloaded, so you want to pay special attention to where the key pair will be stored. And in my case, the key pair will be stored in my downloads folder. So this case, the key pair will be stored in my downloads folder. So I'll click on save. When I click on save, I can come here. You see this is the Devops in my key pair.pem. If I click on this folder, it should automatically, it will open where this key pair is found, and I'll be able to see the key pair. So if I come to my download folder, this is my download folder, you see Devops in my key pair.pem. Now, once you select that, it means that every time I want to access this server, I must be in this download directory where my key pair is stored. Now, the next important configuration is the network settings. When you're creating an instance, you must have an idea on the network settings. And the network settings is very important because instances must sit within networks. Every instance you have must sit within networks. And for instances to sit within networks, you need to configure the network settings. And for us to do the network configuration, you click on edit. Now, when you click on edit, every time you want to launch an instance, you must specify the virtual private cloud which the instance will be, which VPC are you creating this instance in. So you click on the drop down, you see different VPCs. So let's use our Devops in my prod VPC, which we created in our VPC modules above. Now, based on your architecture, do you want the instance to be in a public subnet or in a private subnet? The subnet is very important. Again, you can have information, the subnet in which the network interface is located. So as you select a VPC, you must specify if you want this instance to be in a public subnet or in a private subnet. So we are going to launch this instance in a public subnet. So you automatically see the two subnets that are available in this VPC which we created. We have the Devops in my prod public subnet and the Devops in my prod private subnet. So we'll be selecting the Devops in my prod public subnet. Now, public IPs are the ways through which you can assign or you can access an instance over the web browser, like we have this Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox or Microsoft Edge or Safari. So if you want to be able to access this server over the console, you're going to enable this auto assign public IP. This means that every time an instance, a public IP will by default be attached to the instance or provision or given to that instance. Now, we talked previously about security groups, and this is one very important use case. Every EC2 instance you create must have a security group attached to it, because the security group is like a firewall controlling which traffic can get into the instance and which traffic can get out of the instance. So once you're configuring your instance under firewall settings, you can select existing security groups, or you can create a security group. Now in this case, let's begin by looking for existing security groups. If you click on select existing security groups, we created 2 security groups in our previous module, or we created one security group, sorry, the Devops in Mike security group, which we created in our VPC module. So if I was creating this instance, I could just select the Devops in Mike security group, and it will reference the security group which I created in the previous module. But if I do not want to use an existing security group, I'll select create a new security group. So this means that as I'm creating this instance, you create a security group for this instance. Now let me give the name of the security group Devops in Mike instance, Devops in Mike instance security group, instance SG, Devops in Mike instance security group, and then I'll copy it. Let me right click and copy, and then under description I'll replace this description with it. So I'll also paste it by pressing Ctrl V. Once I press Ctrl V, I'll have the name of the security group Devops in Mike security group, and then the security group instance or the description will have the same description. Now, very important, what are the inbound group rules? You see by default we have port 22 assigned by default. What does this mean? By default, AWS recommends you being able to SSH, use a secure shell agent to access this server. So by default, port 22 is enabled, and it allows traffic from anywhere. If you want to further customize like we saw previously, you can specify a specific IP address, or you can just say my IP. So we're going to allow this port 22, which is the default port, and then we are going to add another security group rule. For this security group rule, we are going to test how to connect to an instance using the public IP. So under this second security group rule, you see we have not yet given any group rule. So we are going to search for HTTP. We select HTTP. Again, once you click on add security group rule, you come to the type, you search for HTTP. Once you select HTTP, it automatically picks the port range of HTTP, which is port 80. Now for the source type, instead of having custom, we can say anywhere. And when you say anywhere, just like the previous, it means that anywhere traffic is coming from on your network or in your network, you can have access on port 80. So we are going to allow just these 2 security groups, the port 22 for SSH and port 80 for access over the web browser. Now you can have some more networking configurations. Now this is another very important thing, the storage. What capacity of storage do you want to be attached to this instance on creation? If you want the instance to have any given number of gigabit, you need to specify the storage, or you need to configure the storage. You can have as high as any capacity you want to have for your given instance. Now you scroll down, the last thing which you must know when launching an instance is this advanced details. The advanced details give you the possibility to attach an EC2 role. We created a role previously. You can attach an instance profile, and there was a role we created previously. So these are different roles that we have in an environment. If you are to attach a test EC2 role which you created previously, this is where you can make use of that role, meaning that this instance which you are creating will have access to your AWS account using this role. But in this case, we are not going to be using any role. So let's click on select, so we don't have any EC2 role. And then the last most important thing which you should take note of is the user data. We are going to see detailedly in our next module what the user data is, but basically the user data helps us to run some form of configurations on our instance on startup. So once you're launching an instance and you want to have some configurations running on startup, you want to put that in the user data. So summarily, to launch an instance, you give the instance a name, you select the instance type or the instance OS type, you pick a particular Amazon machine image for the instance, and then you select the instance type. In this case, we use T2 Micro. You create a key pair if you do not have a key pair, and then you assign or use that key pair, taking note of the download or the folder in which you downloaded the key pair. You edit your network security settings by inputting the VPC, the subnet, and then if you want to be able to access it over the console, you enable auto assign public IP, and then we created a security group that has 2 security group rules, port 22 and port 80 open. And then of course we saw the user data section, even though we are not using any user data. This equally is a summary. Now you have one instance. If you want to provision 10 instances on the go, you can change the number here from 1 to 10, but we're equally going to allow it as 1. And then we have a summary of the AMI, a summary of the instance type, the security group that was used, and the storage. So once you do all of these, all that is needed to create the instance is to select launch. So once you click on launch instance, it's going to say launching instance. It begins by creating a security group, and then after creating that security group, you attach that security group to the instance. So they say, please wait while we launch your instance. Do not close your browser tab. So after the security group is created, it's now going to use that security group. You now see it's use that security group to launch the instance. It tells you successfully initiated launch of instance. This it means it's currently being initiated. Now once you launch an instance, you can create billing and free usage alerts. You can connect your instance to an RDS database. You can create a snapshot policy. You can create a load balancer. You can create an AWS budget for this instance and all whatnot. So these are some more configurations you can have for a given instance. And with these more configurations for a given instance, they give you more granularity on how to manage this given instance or how to manage this instance. Now, once you've created the instance, you can get to the instance by clicking this ID here, or you can click on view all instances. But we are going to click on view all instances. So let's click on view all instances. If you click view all instances, it takes you back to the EC2 console, and while you're on the EC2 console, you can see instances that are in your AWS environment. Previously we do not have any instance, but now we've launched an instance. We have an instance. We can also click here to make the space bigger. If you want to have that, you click this hamburger to have this sidebar, or you can click on it to cancel the sidebar. Now once you have in your AWS environment, you launch an instance, we can see available instances. This is the Devops with my prod server. This is the instance ID. The instance state is running. The instance type is still to micro. The status check is still initializing. Alarm, view alarm status. We have not yet set up an alarm. It's currently in the US West 1A availability zone. This is the IP address, the public IP address of the instance. And then you have some more configurations for that given instance. This is a security group to which it belongs. This is the key name or the key pair that it belongs to. And then this is the platform, the operating system that it's running on. So to have a summary view, you can just simply tick here. You can simply click on the instance to tick here, and you have more details of the instance. The instance ID, public IP, private IP, instance state, the instance is running, elastic IP. So these are all details. This is the auto assign public IP. This is the public IP of the instance. You could equally see get it here, the public IP of the instance, meaning if you want to access this instance over the browser, you make use of the public IP. Now you can also see status and alarms. You can see if you have set up some status, some alarms, system checks. You can check them at the level of status and alarms. You can also set up monitoring to be able to visualize how your instance performance is using monitoring. And then you can equally see security, how your instance is secure. Basically, by security, you are looking at just the security groups, the inbound rules and the outbound rules for that given or for the given subnet which is being used to launch the instance. And then equally, we have the networking, where you can see the networking details of the instance. You have all the private, public IPs, the network interfaces, no elastic IP, a VPC ID, and all of that. These are networking related settings. This is the exact subnet. If you want to go to the exact subnet where the instance is created, you can click here on the subnet ID. So basically, this is how you create an EC2 instance. In our next module, we are going to create an Ubuntu instance similar to this, and then we'll connect to either instances and then terminate all instances. So let's move to our next module to create our Ubuntu instance. In this module, we are going to be creating an Ubuntu instance. In our previous use case, we created an Amazon Linux instance. To get more information about this Amazon Linux instance, if you highlight here, you can get the instance details like we saw previously. You can see here, this is the instance AMI. The AMI name should be Amazon AMI. You see this instance is making use of the platform Linux. We are going to be launching an Ubuntu instance to see also how you can launch an Ubuntu instance on AWS. So for you to launch an Ubuntu instance, we already have some configuration set up. So we click on launch instance. We click on launch instance. We are going to call it Devops in Mic, Dev server. So the other server we created was a prod server, which we use Amazon Linux. So now for this server, we are going to be using the dev server. So for this server, we are going to call it the dev server. And again, previously we used Amazon Linux when we were configuring the server, but this time we are going to be using the Ubuntu Linux. So we are going to select Ubuntu. So when you click on Ubuntu, the same thing, you need to specify a given AMI image. So we have Ubuntu server. These are the free tier eligible ones. If you scroll down, you see those that are free tier eligible. And like I explained previously, you want to make use of the free tier eligible services or servers to avoid you being billed. So once you select the free tier eligible, they'll tell you some of your current settings will be changed or removed if you proceed. So once you have these, you click on confirm changes. So we're going to confirm changes, meaning you want to create an Ubuntu image. Now we've selected Ubuntu server 22.04 for the instance AMI. Now the next thing which you see here, you can see previously we had a description which was that of the Amazon Linux tool, and the user was EC2 user. But now since we are provisioning an Ubuntu instance, the user here is the Ubuntu user for the username. The same thing, previously we used the Amazon Linux instance type, or the instance type which we use a T2 micro. Again, if you scroll down here, you see several instance types. We have the T2 micro, T2 small, T2 medium, T2 large, X large, depending on the use case. So we want to stick to our T2 micro, which is the instance which is like most affordable instance for demonstration purposes. Now previously, in our previous module, we created a key pair. If you come to your downloads, we created a key pair and we downloaded the key pair. So if you come to my download history, you will see the Devops in my.key pair, which I downloaded in a previous module. Now in this current module, I'm going to make use of the key pair. We created a Devops in my key pair previously, or in our previous module. So rather than us recreating the key pair, we are going to use this Devops in my key pair that is already existing. So I'll select this Devops in my key pair that is already existing. Now again, I mentioned that for every server you must configure security settings. So we are still going to go about configuring security settings for this given instance. And because we already created a security group, I want us to use the same security group. In our previous example, we created a new security group, but in this case we are going to use an existing security group. So before getting to using an existing security group, we first need to click on edit to edit the network settings, and we need to make sure that those instances are on the same or in the same VPC. And to make sure they're in the same VPC, I'll select the Devops in my prod VPC, like the previous VPC, or like the previous instance that was provisioned in the prod VPC. Now once I select the Devops in my prod VPC, the subnet, I'll still maintain this server in the public subnet. I'll maintain this server in the public subnet. And then, like I mentioned earlier, if you want to be able to access this server over the console, you have to auto assign public IP. So in this case, I'll auto assign public IP, and public IP is what gives you the possibility to have an IP address that you can use to assign or to access this server over the console, maybe in a new tab. Now, like I explained, we will not be creating a new security group because we have a security group from our previous module. So I'll just click on select existing security group, and under common security groups, I'll now select the Devops in my instance security group. This is the Devops in my instance security group. This first security group we created when we were looking at the VPC module previously. But in this case, we are going to use the Devops in my instance security group, which has some certain rules. Now, the fact that you've selected the instance security group, if you want to know the group rules or the pods that are exposed with this security group, you can click on compare security group rules. And if you click on compare security group rules, you'll see the instance. Devops in my instance security group, you'll see the pod range port 18 for the source anywhere, and then the same thing, Devops in my instance security group, port 22 for the source anywhere. So this is the basic rules that the security group has open. Now once you have that, you select security group, and when we select the security group, we still have the same storage, 8 GB of storage as our instance storage. And again, like I explained, you can have the possibility to add an instance profile, where if you're trying to attach a role to this instance, you can add an instance profile, as well as you can add some user data to this instance. So summarily, we've been able to give the instance the name Devops in my dev server. We've selected Ubuntu Ubuntu server or Ubuntu operating system, where we select the Ubuntu AMI 22.04, Ubuntu 22.04. And then for the instance type, we select T2.micro. We select our key pair, which we created, the Devops in my key pair. We edit the network settings to select our Devops in my prod VPC, our Devops in my prod public subnet, and then equally we auto assign public IP enabled. We use the previously created security group to use for this current Ubuntu server, and then we maintain the storage as 8 gigabit of storage, and we equally have our user data possibility. Now basically, here's a summary of all the configurations. If you want to increase the number of servers from 2 maybe to 4 to 5 to 6, you can increase the number here to 2 instances, or you can reduce the instances to 1. Now if you increase the numbers to 2, you see AWS tells you consider EC2 auto scaling. We're going to see what auto scaling is in a subsequent module, but if you were to spin up more than 2 instances, AWS recommends you spin up those instances using auto scaling groups. So I'll just maintain the instance number to 1, and then you see the instance AMI here is a canonical Ubuntu with the T2 micro type, and then the Devops in my security group, and basically that's the summary of the instance. So once you have this basic summary, all you need to do is to click on launch instance. With launch instance, because the security group was already created, it wouldn't take long for this instance to be launched. You now see we have the successfully initiated launch of instance. Then you give the instance ID. Now, like I explained, you can connect to this instance using SSH or using the console. By console, I mean the web browser. So you could SSH into this instance using port 22 to SSH into the server, or you could connect on this server using your web browser on port 80. The same thing, you will connect this server to a relational database. For AWS, you can configure the connection between an EC2 instance and the database to allow traffic flow between them. So you can enable connectivity between this server, this Ubuntu server, and a relational database. You can create a snapshot of this server, as well as you can create a load balancer and add this server as a target within the load balancer. You can create an AWS budget and all whatnot. So these are some basic stuffs that you can have as far as this instance is concerned. Now to view this instance, you can click on view all instances. Previously, we created a Devops in my prod server, and the instance state is running. The status check is 2.2. If we refresh this tab, we should be able to now see our Devops in my dev server. This is the Devops in my dev server that has just been created. If you look at the server, we have the instance state is running. T2.micro, we equally have the status check initializing, and like the previous server, you can have a summary of this server here. So we can see here that the Devops in my dev server, this is the instance ID, this is the instance public IP, this is the instance private IP. That means if you want to route this, or you want to use this or access this instance from within the VPC, this is the private IP. But if you want to access it from anywhere, browser or whatever means, you can use the public IP. And you can see the auto assign public IP was actually enabled. And this is the VPC under which the instance is found. This is the specific instance subnet. And if you scroll down, you'll see the platform is equally using a Linux Unix, which is kind of like the Ubuntu. So if you see the AMI location, it's using Amazon Ubuntu images. If you come back to our previous server, if you look at the AMI location, it was already using Amazon Linux. AL stands for Amazon Linux 2023, contrary to our Devops in my dev server, which is using Amazon Linux. So this one is using Amazon Linux. And then equally, we saw that we can have the EC2 user as the default user for this. So you equally see the key pair that is attached to this server. So if you refresh this now, you should be able to have this instance. Well, you should be able to have the instance equally passing the 2-on-2 check. Once the instance passes the 2-on-2 check, you will then have the possibility to configure the server more or connect to the server. So for both servers, you can get more information about the servers here. You can check the instance state. If you want to stop the instance, you can stop it. If you want to reboot, you can reboot. If you want to terminate, like deleting it, you can delete here. As well as under actions, you can connect, you can view details, you can manage instance states. You can equally have some instance settings. You can change some settings here. For networking, you can detach network interface, attach network interface. For security, you can change the security groups of the instance, modify the IAM role, and so on. So these are some basic information as far as the instance is concerned. So in our next module, we are going to be accessing each of these instances using the console, like the web browser, as well as using the command line interface.